It's up to you. That's your own analysis. I mean, you're looking at two pictures of two political leaders. Two political leaders, different ideologies. You know, which one's good, which one's bad? Are they both good? Are they both bad? This one's a little bit easier maybe for us to determine a good or a bad. Two generals. Eisenhower and Hitler. Funny thing is that at a point in history, upon the rise of the German Empire, Hitler was considered almost a godlike figure in his own country. People, I mean, he was able to rebel the masses and get them to do the most heinous things against other human beings. I mean, there had to be some kind of a fervor there and some mystique about Hitler that some saw him as good at some point in history. This is my favorite. Two llamas.
Both good. Both good.
Yeah, both good. I couldn't resist that one. I'm sorry. The first thought that came to mind, we're talking about good. I mean, the first thought was Mother Teresa. When Teresa said, I want you to do a talk about goodness. And I'm telling you honestly, this was probably one of the most involved talks that I've ever prepared for. Because I really wanted to focus on what was good. And how could I communicate that in a lesson that was 20 minutes long? And what could you take from it out of this room into the world? And really, to give the full lesson justice, I'll have to just give you this disclaimer. This is a topic that could probably go on for 4 or 5 Sundays. So I had to try to surmise and condense it down into what we see as good. And what we saw in all of these instances here was what we define as good. We use our discernment, we use our judgment to determine what's good for us. You know, I like Coke. That's good. You may like Pepsi. That's good for you. Somebody else may like Gatorade. That's good for them. You know, and over here, you know, somebody may be a Republican or a Democrat. What's good? It's our judgment. So when we ask ourselves, what is goodness? What is good? Let's remember this one thing as we walk out of this room, that is through our judgment that we determine what our good is. It's our judgment. And this is on the physical plane here, in this world. We probably use the method of judgment 100,000 times a day. In everything we do, we have to judge our next step. We have to judge what time we need to leave our house to get to work. We judge what time we need to take stuff out of the freezer to thaw out for dinner. We judge, you know, when we're going to put that on the stove to cook it. You know, everything we do in our life is centered around some sort of a judgment. And not necessarily a judgment that's judging down, but you know, you have to judge your time. You have to judge every facet of your life in order to go through life and function. And so it's very easy for us to label things. Oh, that's good. I'm sure as people who've grown up in the world of modern conveniences, I remember my grandma, I used to have to wash my laundry with a washboard. I'm sure that she thinks a washer and dryer is really good. Maybe other people, you know, I have a dry sink in my house. A dry sink in my house. Whoever used a dry sink? Did you ever use a dry sink? Did you ever use a dry sink? Anybody here? A dry sink is just it was a sink they used to wash dishes in before they had running water in a house. You know, these all modern conveniences that make our life good. Really, you know? What happens when you have a pipe bust in your wall and you have a plumbing leak in your house? Is that good? So, the first realization I had was it was our judgment that determines what we think is good. But what is divine good? The first person I thought of when Teresa asked me to do this talk was Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa was born Agnes Ganji Bahaju. At the age of 12, she knew that she was going to dedicate her life to the religious order. So at the age of 18, she made a lifelong commitment to join her sister's order. A lifelong commitment. So much so that at the time she joined the order, she never saw her sister or her mothers again. Her whole life. So this was certainly a lifelong commitment. Her father had passed away as an early, when she was a very young child. I'm sorry, the chips are in my throat. Imagine that. I do need to take a drink. She was a teacher. She taught school. And she was very passionate about her work in education and teaching. But it was on her way to a retreat in 1946 where she passed through the slums of Calcutta, where she got what she said, the call within the call. This was my calling. To go live among the poor. To leave the convent, to leave the comfort of her existence, to leave what she knew, to go into a world that was foreign, scary, dark, ridiculed, put aside, turned a blind eye to go right into the depths of that and live. She could have been like millions of other people who can easily blame poverty on those who are impoverished. But her role was to love. Her role was to educate street children. To make a school for people who didn't have an opportunity to go to school. To feed the hungry. To serve the poor. In 1950, she received permission from the Vatican to begin her own religious order called the Missionaries of Charity. And today, it currently consists of over 4,500 sisters in 133 countries. And in those missionaries, they take care of refugees, prostitutes, the mentally ill, abandoned children, lepers, AIDS victims, the aged, convalescent. There are currently 19 homes alone in Calcutta where she began her ministry, or her missionary. She got her name Saint Teresa, or Teresa, Mother Teresa, from her favorite missionary, the patron saint of missionaries, Saint Teresa. You could look at this and say this is a divine good. A divine good. That she did not judge. She just loved. The song that I sang, Do All You Can, was written about Nkosi Johnson. He was a boy born with the HIV virus.